What's up, everyone? I'm here with Henry Gilroy, writer and producer of Star Wars Rebels and Star Wars The Clone Wars, among many other things. But we're going to talk about Clone Wars and Rebels and maybe even a little bit about Resistance. I know you're not involved in that one, but I liked some of the things you had to say about it in the animation panel the other day. But as animation, what do you think is one of the advantages of working in that field versus live action when it comes to Star Wars?
I think the possibilities are endless. I think there's things you can execute far easier in animation. Just the alien creation, and as well as kind of giving a broader scope of what the world is and how wide the galaxy is. Obviously, you saw in Clone Wars, there were dozens of planets that were visited with all new alien species we've never seen. So I think that you look at a show like Clone Wars and even Rebels to an extent, the possibilities for what you can achieve technically for amazing visuals is really special.
You mentioned in the animation panel that you could be a little more free with force powers as well. Did you ever have to, how was it striking that balance between too much but still superhuman and cool?
Yeah, at least the way we approached Clone Wars, that it was the Jedi's powers very similar to they were into the live action series. They weren't able to jump, 100 stories, and they couldn't pull a Star Destroyer out of the sky. Those are kind of video game conventions, or the 2D Gendy series. We saw the Jedi had these kinds of powers, but really we were trying to fit the Clone Wars stories in between the prequels and the original trilogy, which means you're gonna have them have the same approximate kind of powers. Now, as far as expanding the Force and the mysteries of the Force, I think those storylines, like the Mortis, obviously, and the World Between Worlds, those stories allowed us to broaden what aspects of the Force. Specifically the Jedi, Ezra having a special talent to connect and to bring, whether it's the creatures together or to bring people together. That was a way that you could say he used the Force to express, or a way that he expressed the Force.
So you've been dropping a couple little bombshells the last couple days. And just things that I had never ever considered. For example, when we see Rex and Wolf and Gregor in Star Wars Rebels again, and they have their chips removed, I just kind of assumed somehow they had their chips removed before Order 66, but you've suggested that might not be the case.
Well, actually, yeah, I did, because I'm thinking to myself, well, the fact that Wolf is still affected, and the fact that he basically says, oh, the Jedi have come for revenge, that kind of insinuates that, oh, the clones realized what they did after the fact. And maybe not right away. The Jedi were they were programmed to believe when that order went off that the Jedi were traitors and they had to be executed. That simple. So it isn't something that if they had taken their chip out a long time before Order 66, I don't think Wolf would have reacted that way.
Sure.
So as far as Rex, and I certainly didn't mean to imply that the same goes for Rex. But I think we'll have to wait and see.
Right. I mean, according to the Ahsoka book, it looks like we might get to see that in the Clone Wars. I won't put you on the spot and say what we will or won't, but now, that added this whole new layer of oh, crap.
Right, because if you think about it, Wolf and Gregor were probably not on the same planet as Rex. Mm-hmm. So who's to say that when they got their chips out? It could have been after, years later. I mean, we have no way of knowing that, at least right now. And I think because those three characters ended up finding each other after, and most likely when I think about it, and I don't know this for sure, but it seems like after Order 66 came down, and after the fallout out of that, and after the creation of the Empire, and after the clones were decommissioned, probably there were some clones who realized, oh, we have chips on our head, we got to go save our brothers. And that meant finding them and saying, hey, you got this chip in your head, you got to get it out.
Right.
So that to me makes more sense than, I better get my chip out. If you know what the chip is going to do, that to me changes why you would get it out. And if someone came to you and said, hey, Alex, you have a chip in your head, you need to get it out, you'd be like, So you want to cut a hole in my skull? I'm fine. And take something out? Yeah, I'm not going to let you do that.
Right.
And probably 80% of the clones said that. 90%.
Yeah, and I think Dave said that his original plan for the ATTE and Rebels was to have even more clones than just 3. So that's interesting to think of them going around and searching, and how many maybe they ran into, and said no thanks. But yeah, that's just something that everyone kind of gasped at in the panel. Like, no, don't tell me that Wolf probably.
Well, all you have to do is look at how Wolf reacts.
Yeah, and it makes total sense.
He takes a shot at Kanan.
It makes complete sense.
He takes a shot at Kanan. So, to me, I thought it was clear. So when I hear that, oh, wait a second. No.
I think it was just we didn't want to.
Oh, okay. All right. You guys are in denial.
Yeah, right.
That never occurred to me. I just thought it was clear. Like, oh yeah, absolutely. And Gregor, he's kind of a little shell shocked from the end of his adventure. So anyway.
And speaking of Order 66, last night at the Clone Wars panel, I think it was, someone brought up the Jedi Temple Guard and what was going on with them, and then someone suggested maybe the Grand Inquisitor helped with the slaughter, and you were just like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where I definitely created that scenario. I don't know if it's been written anywhere.
Not that I can recall.
However, you know what? That's not to say that someone at Lucasfilm might disagree and there might be a different story.
Okay.
But that was definitely a story
That's kind of your own
had written. Well, I wrote it while I was working for Lucasfilm.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
The idea of that. And yeah, we talked about it. Because to me, it made a lot of sense as to, wait a minute, like in a time of war, there would have been temple guards, and they would have sensed, wait, something's really wrong.
Right.
As soon as Anakin and these troopers show up. So the fact that they just walked in the door, there's a reason there weren't temple guards there.
Of course.
And that was because they were betrayed.
And again, and it makes complete sense. Now, would that be just the Grand Inquisitor maybe turning on those temple guards to take them out? Okay.
Yeah. And that's the thing is in my mind, that was something that was going to happen, and that particular temple guard, he had actually been corrupted by Palpatine, at least in my head.
Sure.
So it makes sense that his fellow temple guards had no idea that he had turned, and it was too late.
Of course.
So anyway,
are there any other stories about the other Inquisitors and we know that they were Jedi beforehand? Were they also temple guards, or were they just kind of strewn about the galaxy? Or?
Yeah, the idea that I'd pitched is that each one of, and you kind of get this from who the Inquisitors are, is they're definitely, I want to say, flawed Jedi. Mm-hmm. And I think Palpatine paid attention to Jedi who were maybe vain.
Right.
Or a little too cruel or brutal. Or the Jedi who probably had begun to fall because they were fighting a war. Mm-hmm. And I think he paid attention to those Jedi. Most of them were probably sort of younger Jedi who were, now fighting the war and not being as true to the Jedi code as they maybe should have been. So
sure.
I think he probably singled those guys out just in case things didn't work out with Anakin.
Oh.
So then he would have Force users he could basically turn into weapons against the Jedi.
Sure.
And it's entirely. I haven't read the most recent Darth Vader comics that has the Inquisitors in it, so I hope I'm not contradicting what them. And sometimes that happens is you develop a story, you develop the back of the story and the history of that, and for what happened, and then someone comes along and goes, oh wait, here's another way to tell that story that furthers the mythology, so we can go into a new place with it. So
yeah,
in my mind, in writing The Grand Inquisitor, that was my intention of what his backstory was.
Cool. This is a question I get, and I don't know if there is an answer to it, but how were the Inquisitors and the Grand Inquisitor, and even Anakin, protected from Order 66? Do we have any thoughts on that?
Well, if you think about it, Anakin was already on his way across the galaxy. So the next time any clones saw him, he was already Darth Vader. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the Inquisitors, I think, at least and I don't have a story written down. Well, I guess I have a story written down, but I think that those Jedi probably were stunned rather than executed.
Huh.
Or they got to the point where at least in my mind, Palpatine basically said, yeah, this particular Jedi, don't kill them.
Right. Did he
Capture
have like a Google Drive folder where he could drop in an Inquisitor's profile and be like, okay, he's cool now, keep all these in the kill file?
But I think, again, it's like if you think, okay, there were 10,000 Jedi, and then the war whittled them down by thousands, right? And then of those thousands, there's literally a fraction. So the number, that list is a very small list.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like maybe there are 10 Inquisitors around that number, and then you have Anakin, and yeah, it's a tiny fraction. Let's talk about Rebels a little now.
Okay.
What was it like shifting from Clone Wars, which at least in its earlier days was scattered chronologically, and then you went with a much more of a through line with Star Wars Rebels? What's it like writing for those shows, and how is it different?
Yeah, I think the great thing about the Clone Wars is you can kind of jump around and follow different characters and develop new worlds, and I think that's like something fantastic. Rebels really was Ezra's story, and him, being adopted by this family, coming in to be this family. He's a loner, accepting family, and then really expanding his idea of what a family is into the community, which is, the wolves and all of the Hondo and everyone that he helps, who comes in to help save Lothal at the end of the day. I mean, like I said, he is the literal bridge, right, to other characters. So it's a completely different storytelling strategy. Even though we're seeing Ahsoka's story in the Clone Wars, there's a lot of other characters that are developed.
Right.
And where Rebels, it was really about Ezra's story and Ezra becoming a Jedi, but it was also Kanan's story too, and Hera and Zeb and Sabine. So I think telling the story of the family is, I think, a little more satisfying for me, because you can really track their growth a little easier than you would watching the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars is an epic series that it really gives you the scope of the galaxy. But also, I think the stories are fantastic. So I don't know, it's apples and oranges to me.
I know
what I mean. So when you go to tell a story about family, and that's something that Simon Kinberg would always come back to, is how does this particular situation, or how does this story relate to the family unit?
Right.
And I think that's something that, regardless of it happening on some alien planet with robots and droids or whatever, species of aliens, it doesn't matter. It's about this family unit that all of us can relate to.
Right. One of my favorite Star Wars moments, I guess more in fandom ever, is the reveal of the Season 3 trailer. I was watching the live stream from London, and I had to watch the trailer again because I couldn't hear the trailer over the roar of the crowd. And I was home, like, jumping out of my seat.
Sure.
What was it like to experience that from your side?
It was fantastic. It was amazing. It was great. I think the reaction to a lot of people are like, wait, who's the blue guy? I don't understand. They haven't read the books or whatever.
Right.
But I think the idea of when you have Season 2 and you end Season 2, you brought in Darth Vader at the beginning of Season 2 and at the end, but then Maul shows up at the end of Season 2, you're like, oh my gosh. Season 3 comes along and it's like, how are we going to top this? And I think the idea is like, okay, we need a new, war story villain who brings it to another level. It's because you can't keep bringing Darth Vader back in, because our characters would just die.
Yeah, right.
And also it diminishes him if they get away all the time.
Agreed.
The fact that they got away because he let them, first of all, and then later on, the only reason they got away was because he sensed that Ahsoka was still alive, and that was distracting to him. So I think bringing in Thrawn really said, hey, we're widening it, but we're also paying homage to one of our most beloved characters from the Legends. So
yeah,
no, I loved it. It still gives me goosebumps just because of that. Also, that Kevin Kiner music.
Oh yeah.
When you hear that,
those organs, I don't know what it was, and you're like, that's Thrawn. I hadn't even seen his face
you knew
yet.
it. Oh, really?
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
because we're on the back of his head, and people are like, when you see, you do the reaction videos, people are like, what? Who is that? Is that Darth Raven or whatever? You know what I mean? And then when they see him, like, oh my gosh.
I think I had started to perk up when you saw his back, and I heard the organs, and just the way he was talking, what he was talking about, I was like, are they really doing it? And he steps out of the shadow, and I was like, oh my god. I need to ask about the world between worlds, because that's one of my favorite things ever. How did all of that come about? What does that mean to you, to the rest of the writing team?
Yeah, a lot of that really, I think, came out of George's conversations with Dave about the Force. I wasn't at Lucasfilm when they did the Mortis trilogy. I knew what was going on. I was in contact with Dave and we were talking about it, but you know, the fact that we were bringing back Liam Neeson to do the voice of Qui-Gon, it's pretty amazing, you know. It's a really great story, and the thing I love about it is it's very mythic.
Yeah.
And it leaves so many open questions at the end of the day. You actually come out of it going like, and I think that's a lot of people say, oh, I hate it. I hate the Mortis trilogy. I think a lot of it is because it's not neat.
Yeah.
It's kind of confusing. I mean, what does it mean? And I think if you just watch it from a storytelling experience of like, oh, the story is about Anakin's relationship with the Force, but also his relationship with Ahsoka and who she is. And it's really like to see the aspects of the Force embodied, I think is really interesting. And it's weird. It just it's just weird. And I think so World Between Worlds, I think, is just an extension of that. And I kind of said in the other room that I think that whoever walked into the temple would have a different experience based on what their connection with the Force is, but also the things that they would be able to interact with. Ezra had a connection to Ahsoka, so there's a reason why he saw the owl, and the owl contacted him, because she had already had a deep connection with Ahsoka, as we saw in the Mortis trilogy. So to say like, oh, well, wait a minute, this is, I mean, I think every aspect of planning this kind of story evolves as you're telling the story.
Sure.
So it wasn't something that was like, oh, and you know, it was figured out in Clone Wars. Later on, we're going to show that this is how this happens. And it wasn't like that. I think it's developing new ideas without explaining them, and just show that, oh yeah, the Force is far more powerful than you think it is, but that doesn't mean everyone has access to it.
Yeah. I loved that idea that it would manifest itself differently to different people. I thought that was really cool. Okay, we need to talk about Clone Wars Saved, and we'll wrap it up with that.
Okay.
I know you can't say much about it, but are you excited that it's coming back?
Oh yeah, I am super excited. I mean, actually, I think I knew earlier, but I think, after the big announcement in San Diego, I texted Dave and said, hey, congratulations, you're getting to finish it. And I know that was so disappointing, not only to, the millions of fans, but also to the people who were making the show. Yeah. There wasn't closure. And it's funny, not being able to end Clone Wars definitely had effect on how Rebels ended.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because we're going to make sure that we actually complete Ezra's story, or this part of Ezra's story, just in case there isn't a season 5. So if we had done another 22 episodes and they're going, yeah, we're probably not going to do any more, I think the fans would have been, wait, what?
Again?
No!
Yeah,
right?
And Dave said as much in Celebration.
Yeah, so it's exactly that. And I think it's rare. I mean, when you watch, and we actually had a long time to plan for it. You watch a series like The X-Files, or you watch Lost. I know a lot of people were really disappointed in the way that those series ended, because the writers have done such a fascinating job and such a great job developing the characters and creating more questions, that when you get to the end, a lot of audiences are like, oh, so what is it? Oh, it's that, And we didn't want it to be that way. We wanted it to actually have our characters have a clear goal, but also, besides just a clear physical goal of like getting the Empire off Lothal, it was the goal of actually showing how Ezra had grown up and become a Jedi. Mm-hmm. And in those last moments when he doesn't have his master to rely on, he demonstrates that's who he is.
Right. Are there any arcs from the Clone Wars that you really wished we got to explore, and that aren't necessarily going to be? I know you can't say which arcs are going to be.
Why did you ask me this question? Of course, there's stories. And what's funny is you might see some of them.
Sure.
But I can't really tell you what they are.
I figured I was taking a shot.
Okay. I know it's funny because I know that there's been extra animatics were released online. StarWars.com's got like the Bad Batch.
The Bad Batch and the Crystal Crisis.
Right, exactly. And I think it's, to me, I'm going like, oh, those ones should be automatic. But honestly, I'm not sure. I do know, of a couple of stories, but I'm more excited for you guys to experience them.
I think we all are.
Yeah, so.
This is probably another one where you're going to be like, I can't tell you, but I get this question all the time. People ask, since this is being produced or released after Rebels, now there's maybe a chance to make some extra connections to these other stories. Is there a possibility that we could see a young Caleb Doom or maybe some of the Inquisitors, or is that just nope, not even going to say anything?
That's a great idea. I would say.
You want me to call Dave right now?
Well, I've got his number. Do you have his number?
No.
Oh, okay. Here, let me just give it to you. No,
yeah, thanks.
No, you'll have to. I was going to say, gosh, you'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm not sure. So, but
okay.
I think those are the sort of things that are probably considered and talked about. But it comes down to like, well, we're going back again, remember, to Ahsoka's story.
Yeah, I do think you need to keep it focused on instead of making it an Easter egg.
Yeah,
fest.
no, I mean, it's the sort of thing where if it was necessary to actually set it up or have something,
right?
I can think of a couple of instances, but it would really have to mean something to Ahsoka's story,
right?
And I think she's with Bo-Katan. It's I mean,
Siege of Mandalore we know about.
Yeah. I mean, that seems like that's kind of what's going on that trailer. So that's all I'll say.
Okay. Well, the last thing I wanted to say, since Star Wars Resistance is coming out, is I just wanted to address that I feel like Star Wars Rebels really prepared me for Resistance as a fan. I remember when Rebels was like being teased and stuff, I was like, I don't know if this is for me, but like I had this YouTube channel and I was like, I'm gonna check it out, I'm gonna watch them all, and I was proven to be so wrong, and I adore Rebels, and it has some of my favorite Star Wars moments ever, like
awesome.
The World Between Worlds, Twilight of the Apprentice, Twin Suns. There are so many things in it that I was like, I can't believe I almost slept on this show. And now, I mean, it seems like all of the animated shows, at first people are like, this is too childish, and then they grow up with the characters.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, you come to adore this family. It's funny you should say that about Resistance. And I kind of mentioned that, like, oh yeah, I saw the scripts in the printer 2 years ago, and I chose not to look at them because I was still working on season 3 of Rebels while Resistance was getting going.
Which is crazy how far in advance this
sure.
stuff, like,
oh yeah,
people are working hard on this for so long.
Oh, and that's why it ends up being great, because Lucasfilm was really supportive of making sure that it gets done right, and it's the same with Rebels. As far as that, I remember actually Clone Wars. There was people weren't really happy when it first came out. Didn't like the movie or whatever, and it was the same thing. I remember seeing the hashtag Space Aladdin after the early episodes of Rebels, and we're like, we try not to pay attention to that and just make a great show. I think it's going to be the same thing, where it's
I do too.
Yeah, it's just you're going to go, I don't like the style, but then you're going to get caught up in the characters, and the story is going to be compelling. And Brandon Auman, who came over from the Nickelodeon's Ninja Turtles series, which went for 5 seasons or 6 seasons or something like that. He has a great storytelling sensibility. It's funny. I always joke that he's funnier than me, and I think it's true as far as like his ability, his writing ability, his dialogue's great. And Justin Ridge, who's the other executive producer, director on that side of it, he has a really lively, storytelling sensibility that's visual. So I think the idea is that you're not going to look at this and go like, oh, it's Rebels Light. No, it's a different show.
Yeah.
It still has all the elements that we love from Star Wars, though. I mean, I do know Dave has talked about doing this story or this show or the idea of fighter pilots, and I know a huge influence for him was the Blah Blah Black Sheep series, which was a huge influence to me. And that was a bunch of pilots stuck on an island in the South Pacific. So you don't have to go far to kind of see what influenced it. And that was more of a sitcom feeling. And I think that the series, just from when I think about it and I look at it, it kind of reminds me of that.
Well, I can't wait to see it, and I honestly do credit Rebels almost for like my optimism at this point as a fan.
Oh, good.
So I think that's everything I have. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
You're welcome.
And you had some great answers, some exciting little things that I think people are going to be happy to hear. So.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Tune into Resistance this fall, you guys. You're going to love it.